All right, so we're tackling a tough one today. You sent us a podcast all about the Yankees' recent World Series loss, and let's be honest, it's got to be a tough pill to swallow for any fan. What I found really interesting, though, is how the podcast goes beyond just the game itself. We've got articles analyzing the plays, sure,
Okay.
also fan reactions, historical comparisons. It's a whole exploration of what this loss means for the team, the fans, and the future of the Yankees.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The podcast really doesn't shy away from the raw emotion.
Yeah.
For the players, this isn't just a loss. It's the culmination of months of work, dedication, dreams. And for the fans, there's that shared sense of heartbreak, that feeling of what if. It's almost like a collective grieving process.
Yeah. One thing that really resonated with me was how the podcast frames this loss within the larger context of Yankees history. I mean, they're a team that's practically synonymous with winning, so how do they reconcile this loss with that legacy?
That's where those historical comparisons come in. They talk about legendary teams, even the Yankees themselves, who faced seemingly insurmountable setbacks, losing streaks, devastating defeats, only to rise again even stronger. It's like the podcast is saying, look, every great team, every champion has stumbled at some point. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about how you respond to it.
Right. That actually reminds me of something I read in one of the articles about how the 1996 Yankees, after years of near misses, finally broke through and won the World Series. It really highlighted the idea that sometimes those tough losses can be the fuel that ignites a championship run.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the podcast takes that historical perspective and applies it directly to this current team. It's like they're asking, will this loss break them? Or will it be the defining moment that propels them to a new level of greatness?
That's a powerful question. And I think it goes beyond just the players. It makes me wonder, what does this loss mean for the fans? How should they process this disappointment, this feeling of what could have been?
Well, the podcast actually addresses this head on. They acknowledge the fans' pain, even anger in some cases, but then they shift the focus. They remind everyone of those electrifying moments that led up to the World Series, those nail-biting games, those incredible displays of skill and teamwork.
It's like they're saying, don't let the bitterness of the loss overshadow the joy of the journey.
Exactly. And they go even further, arguing that the fans have a crucial role to play in how the team moves forward. It's not just about cheering from the stands. It's about providing that unwavering support, that belief in the team's ability to bounce back. They even call it a call to action, urging fans to channel their disappointment into a renewed sense of commitment.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's like they're saying that the fans' energy, their passion, can actually influence the team's performance, their resilience.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that shared connection, that symbiotic relationship between the team and its fans, and raises a really important question. If the players need to reflect, evaluate, and come back stronger, the fans need to do the same. Yeah, it really is. The players draw strength from the fans, and the fans in turn are inspired by the team's resilience. And speaking of resilience, the podcast dives deep into the Yankees' remarkable history of bouncing back from setbacks. It's not just a one-time thing. It's practically woven into the fabric of their identity.
I'm really curious about this. We're talking about more than a century of baseball here, so there must be some incredible stories of the Yankees overcoming adversity. Does the podcast give any specific examples?
Absolutely. They highlight specific moments,
Okay.
like the comeback from a 3-0 deficit against the Red Sox in the 2004 ALCS, a moment etched in baseball lore. But what's really insightful is how they analyze the underlying mindset that drives these comebacks. It's this unwavering belief that setbacks are temporary, that the Yankees will always find a way to rise to the occasion.
It's like that famous saying, it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Exactly. And the podcast even goes a step further, suggesting that this bounce-back factor isn't just limited to the team itself. They argue that it's something that permeates the entire organization, from the front office to the coaching staff to the fans.
So it's more than just a strategy. It's almost like a cultural philosophy.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is how they connect this philosophy back to the fan experience. They argue that this belief in resilience, this never-give-up attitude, is something that fans can embody as well.
So instead of dwelling on the loss, fans can actually tap into that same energy, that same determination, to help propel the team forward.
That's the idea. It's like they're saying, don't just be a spectator, be a participant in the team's journey. Channel that disappointment, that frustration, into a force that pushes the team to evolve, to improve, to come back stronger than ever.
Now that's what I call a deep dive. We've gone from analyzing the emotional impact of the loss to exploring the historical context of resilience, to understanding the active role fans can play in the team's resurgence. But let's be real, some fans are probably still skeptical. They're probably thinking, okay, history and resilience are great, but what about concrete action? What are the Yankees actually going to do to get back on top?
You're right. And the podcast doesn't shy away from addressing those practical concerns. They delve into the strategic moves the Yankees could make, including potential player acquisitions, the development of young talent, and even potential shifts in coaching strategies.
So they're not just talking about a change in mindset, they're talking about tangible actions that could lead to real improvement on the field.
Absolutely. And they get into specifics. They mention certain players the Yankees could target in free agency, highlighting their strengths and how they could fit into the team's dynamic. They even discuss the potential of promoting players from the minor leagues, showcasing the up-and-coming talent that could be the key to future success.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. We're talking about the future of the Yankees here. It's not just about rehashing the past, it's about actively shaping what's to come. What stood out to you about their analysis of these potential moves?
One thing that struck me was their balanced approach. They acknowledge the importance of acquiring established stars, but they also emphasize the value of developing homegrown talent, creating a sustainable foundation for the team's future. And what's really insightful is how they connect this back to the idea of resilience. They argue that a team built on both experienced A&D young talent is inherently more adaptable, more capable of overcoming challenges.
I love how they weave all these threads together, the emotional impact, the historical context, the strategic moves. It really paints a complete picture of what the Yankees are facing and where they could go from here. But even with all this optimism, I think it's fair to say that some fans might still be harboring doubts. What if all these efforts, all these changes, don't lead to another championship? What if this loss is a sign of things to come, a harbinger of decline?
You're touching on a very real fear that many fans might be experiencing right now, and the podcast acknowledges this head on. They don't offer false promises or guarantees. Instead, they challenge the listener to consider a different perspective.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do they reframe that fear of decline?
They pose a powerful question. What if this loss, as painful as it is, becomes the catalyst for a new era of Yankee dominance?
Wow. It's like they're turning the whole narrative on its head. Instead of viewing this loss as a setback, they're suggesting it could be the spark that ignites an even greater chapter in the Yankees story.
Exactly. And they back this up with a really interesting point. They argue that sometimes the most successful teams, the true dynasties, are forged in the crucible of defeat. It's those moments of adversity that force them to reevaluate, to innovate, to push beyond their limits.
You know, that reminds me of how the Chicago Bulls, after losing to the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs for 3 consecutive years, finally broke through and went on to win 6 championships in 8 seasons. It's almost like those losses fueled their determination, their drive to be the best.
Yeah, this.
It's like those losses forced them to dig deeper to find another gear they didn't even know they had. And that's what I find so compelling about this whole discussion. It's not just about hoping the Yankees will bounce back. It's about recognizing their potential to emerge from this loss even stronger, even more formidable than before.
And what's exciting is that this potential isn't just theoretical. The podcast actually delves into the specifics of how this new era of dominance could take shape. They talk about the Yankees' already potent lineup, the young talent waiting in the wings, and the strategic moves they could make to bolster their roster. It's like they're laying out a blueprint for a dynasty in the making.
Yeah. Okay, so they've addressed the emotional impact, the historical context, the strategic possibilities. But did they talk about the actual game itself? What about the on-field performance, the plays,
Yeah.
the strategies? I'm sure the podcast we're deep diving into must have analyzed those aspects too.
Oh, absolutely. We go deep into the X's and O's, analyzing key moments in the World Series, breaking down pitching decisions, fielding plays, batting approaches. And what's fascinating is that they don't just focus on what went wrong. They also highlight areas where the Yankees excelled, showcasing the strengths they can build upon moving forward.
So it's not just about identifying weaknesses. It's about recognizing existing strengths and finding ways to amplify them. That's a really crucial point because it speaks to a growth mindset, a belief that even in defeat, there are lessons to be learned and opportunities for improvement.
Exactly. And what's really insightful is how the podcast connects this back to the broader themes of resilience and evolution. They argue that a willingness to analyze past performance, to learn from both successes and mistakes, is essential for any team that wants to achieve sustained success.
It's like that famous quote from Michael Jordan. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. It's that relentless pursuit of improvement, that willingness to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth, that separates the good from the great.
Precisely. And the podcast really drives this point home in their concluding remarks. They leave us with a powerful question, a challenge to reframe our perspective and see this loss not as an ending, but as a new beginning. They ask, could this loss, as painful as it is right now, actually be the catalyst for a new era of Yankee dominance?
Wow, that's a question that's going to stay with me, that's for sure. And I think it's the perfect note to end on. It's a reminder that even in the face of defeat, there's always hope, always the potential for a comeback, always the possibility of achieving something even greater than before.
Beautifully said. And I think what makes this question so powerful is that it doesn't offer a simple answer. It invites us to consider the possibilities, to engage in the ongoing conversation about the Yankees' future. It challenges us to be more than just fans, to be active participants in the team's journey back to the top.
So, to all of you listening out there, we want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe this loss could be the catalyst for a new era of Yankee dominance? Share your comments, join the conversation, and let's explore this possibility together.
And remember, as the podcast so eloquently reminded us, character is defined not just by championships, but by how a team and its fans
Yeah.
overcome challenges. The Yankees have a history of doing just that, and we're confident they'll do it again.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep the faith, and as always, go Yankees.